Hey guys, what's going on? James here, and in this video today, we're going to be talking about all of the matchups to watch for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers preseason Week 3 matchup versus the Houston Texans. But I am not alone in this video today. Joining me from our friends over at pewterreport.com, it is JC Allen. JC, how you doing, man?
Doing great, man. We're almost here. I mean, we've got what 14 days tomorrow from kickoff, and this Saturday we get a treat. I mean, Bruce has said it over and over again. He said it today again at practice. He's playing these guys a half, and if he doesn't see what he wants to see, they could play into the third quarter, which I thought was a little bit surprising. But we're getting starting Bucs football against, even if it is starting Texans football. They should do pretty well, but to see the guys out there in the field for more than 6 plays, it's going to be awesome. I'm just happy football's finally back. Preseason has been great to watch, but I want the real thing here. We're almost there, baby.
Absolutely. So for everybody who's just tuning in and just kind of like getting into the loop of things, Bruce Arians talked about this earlier on in the week. He had said that the starters are going to play the entire first half, potentially going into the third quarter as well. Reason for that being is because there's going to be that week in between this preseason week 3 and regular season week 1. Bruce Arians wants his starters to be up to game speed to a certain degree, which is why there is going to be a little bit of that extended time playing there. We will get to a little bit of that in this video today, actually. So, JC, let's go ahead and get started here talking about the first matchup that I think we should all keep an eye on going into this upcoming game, and it's going to be the Buccaneers starting offensive line versus the Texans starting pass rush. And we could talk about all the starters, basically, right? The quarterback, Tom Brady, the wide receivers, the tight ends, the defense. But I wanted to specifically have the offensive line here because Tristan Wirfs, he gave up a sack in preseason week 1 and very limited, snap counts there. And I know that there are still people who have some concerns with, say, Donovan Smith. Maybe what's going on with that right guard position with Alex Kappa versus Aaron Stinnie. What are your thoughts right now on the Buccaneers starting offensive line versus this Texans pass rush?
This is one of the most solid units in the NFL. I'm not really worried about preseason play. Tristan Wirfs, yeah, he kind of, there was also a little bit on Kappa as well. Letting up that sack in the Bengals game. It's a fluke. I'm not worried about it. I don't think they're really going to pose a threat. I mean, you're talking about Whitney Merciless, who's a pretty good player, Jordan Jenkins, Shaq Lawson. I'm not downgrading those guys, but look, they're no Khalil Mack, it's no Joey Bosa, and I think that this Buccaneers offensive line, especially at the tackle position, is going to be held up pretty well against the pass rush. I mean, we know how Ryan Jensen is at center, one of the top 10 centers in the league. Ali Marpet should have been on the top 100 list. I think he was headed towards an all-pro season before he got that hiccup with a concussion. And Alex Kappa, even though he's in what appears to be, from Bruce's perspective, a competition with Aaron Stinnie, I haven't seen Aaron Stinnie take one starting rep with the starters at all. So I really think it's Alex Kappa. Remember, he led the fan voting for a while there as the top right guard in the NFL. So whether that's because his name was at the top of the list or not, and everyone skips over guard. But I mean, this offensive line starting unit should be firing on all cylinders. They've looked really good in practice. And you got to remember, too, in practice, they're going against two of the best pass rushers in the league and a young stud in Joe Tryon. So, I mean, they're getting all they can handle in practice. So, going up in a real life game situation against some of these guys in the Texans, I think they should be more than prepared. And, obviously the emphasis is with Tom Brady back there, knowing that you have to play at least a half, you got to protect him.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I will say I understand the concerns, right? It seems like every year, every team's fan base says, what's going on with our offensive line? It doesn't matter what team it is. And I understand those concerns. You want to protect the quarterback, especially a guy of Tom Brady's caliber. So you want your offensive line to be there, be ready to go. But you put it best. We've been at these training camps. We've seen what's been going on. All of these guys have looked very good. Iron has been sharpening iron there, I think, in major ways. And at the end of the day, while I know people are a little bit skittish about some of these guys in the starting lineup right now because we haven't seen a ton of them in real live game action, I don't think it's anything to worry about. Heck, even if they didn't go out there and knock it out of the park against the Texans, I still don't think there's reason to worry, right? At the end of the day, it's preseason football. That's where you get some of those licks in. That's where you get up to game speed, like we talked about at the beginning of this video. So I do think that at the end of the day, everything's going to be fine. I know that people do have their concerns, but let's just take a deep breath and just relax. So,
Exactly.
you're right. So, JC, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, if anything, I'm looking more towards watching the second unit, how they perform, how Josh Wells performs, how Brad Seaton performs, how Aaron Stinney continues to perform, and the two guys that I want to see. Nick Leverett is finally going to be back at his most comfortable position. It looks like at right guard or left guard, wherever they put him. He's going to be back at guard after playing tackle in the first game, and then wire to wire center for the first time he's ever snapped the ball in a live game last week against the Titans. He's going to be back at his most comfortable position at guard, and we're going to get the first look at Robert Hainsey, which is what I'm really excited to see.
Put a pin on that because we will get back to it. I love the way you think, JC. So the second matchup I want to keep an eye on here is going to be more of an out there matchup, right? Something a lot of people might not be thinking about, but it does matter, especially for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It is the special teams coverage unit for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I'm talking about kickoff and punt coverage teams. That's gunners, kickoff guys, whatever you want to call it, versus the Texans return teams. That's punt returning teams. That's kickoff returning teams. JC, obviously we don't have to go in depth about the Texans side of things here because that would be insane, but one thing that's been really interesting to pay attention to, and people have been commenting about it here on this channel, has been the kickoff coverage, the punt coverage. People have not been that impressed, and I want your thoughts about this and what these guys need to do going into this game to have some positive takeaways here.
It hasn't been good. I mean, you look at the last two games, and it looks like it's picking up right where it's left off with the special teams unit was, one of the worst in the league. Punt coverage, kickoff coverage, they're missing tackles. They're not staying in their own lanes. They're not getting through blocks or getting off blocks quick enough to get down the field. And that's something that, really they need to turn it around and improve. I mean, without going too in depth in the Texans, they have Andre Roberts, who's a heck of a return man. So you're going to have to make sure you're containing him and make sure you're getting down there and playing, just playing good special teams, playing exactly as what you're doing in practice and how they're dialing it up. I mean, they haven't looked terrible in practice, but for some reason, when they get into these game situations, it's mind-boggling. And you watch the game against the Titans; they had a couple good returns. We're gonna, watching that matchup is something that we'll be watching this preseason game, but also all season just to see how they can improve. They showed a special emphasis on special teams going out there in free agency afterwards, picking up a guy like Joe Jones, who was a special teams ace over with the Denver Broncos, led the team in tackles all 4 years he was there on special teams. You lost a big piece in Justin Watson with surgery for the year. That's why I think he'll probably be placed on PUP, and then they'll try to bring him back potentially if they need him for special teams usage. I mean, you look at some of the guys they took in the draft: KJ Britt, Grant Stewart, Chris Wilcox, all guys who figure to be on special teams. Antonio Hamilton, a 5-year veteran with the Chiefs who played primarily on special teams. They've tried to address that position and spent resources in the draft and in free agency to try to address that position, but for some reason it's not translating on the field. And, whether it's tackling, whether it's not being able to get out block, whatever it is, that's definitely an area that they need to improve at. And, doing all those things the right way, the details, the small details, is how they're going to turn it around. This is what I'm holding my breath on, James. I mean, the offensive line, I'm good, but this one I need to hold my breath before I breathe a sigh of relief.
Yeah, I agree. It's ironic in a way, right? Because Bruce has been saying literally week in and week out, well, we're looking at these last few guys on special teams. Every week he says it, and it's just something's not clicking there. Like, I think we are seeing guys maybe grow a little bit, some of these younger guys, but it's not clicking yet, I think. And that, understandably so, has gotten a lot of people frustrated just in the fan base, in the community here. So you could argue this might be the most important thing to pay attention to because, a long kickoff return, a long punt return, those can be big momentum swings that people don't really think about because they just think, oh, it's special teams. Who cares? No, special teams matters, man. Especially on those coverage type teams and whatnot. You've got to be able to do your job. It's literally ways some guys make the team and have sustainable jobs for years to come. So it is a big deal. So I very much agree with everything you said there, and this is going to be very critical. We need to see some level of improvement there. Or quite frankly, I don't know what the team does at that point.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at guys like Grant Stewart and Chris Cooper, who was both praised. I mean, inside linebacker competition, they're looking for that fourth guy. Safety, they're looking for that fourth guy as well. Javon Hagan and to an extent, KJ Britt have played better at their position and also have played well at special teams. But, I've heard Chris Cooper's name mentioned the last week. I've heard Grant Stewart a lot the last week. He's not going to offer you anything on the field. He just, he's poor in coverage. He's a great guy, plays with his hair on fire, has a lot of heart, a lot of emotion, but, he's late on diagnosing plays and, he just doesn't have the speed and reaction time to get there. So if he gets thrown into a game as the fourth inside linebacker, as a starting inside linebacker or whatever, you're going to be in trouble there. So, that's exactly what you're talking about. Some of these guys are just going to be career special teamers and they're barely going to see the field. But at the same time, you have to build your roster out. That's why I'm looking towards the waiver wire, especially at that inside linebacker spot. There's other spots where I think they could probably improve, depending on who's released at cornerback, who they go with fifth cornerback. Doesn't seem like Bruce has been overly impressed with Hamilton or D. Delaney, especially Herb Miller. I think Javon Hagan has probably done enough to make this team as a fourth safety, but if they can upgrade there, that's somewhere they could look as well. But other than that, I mean, the real question marks on this team on the defensive side of the ball, and these defensive players that you're having that are showing up a little bit on special teams, they're kind of liabilities on defense. And, injuries pile up, especially your team just won the Super Bowl. Everyone's going to give you your best shot. Everyone's going to come at you hard. You can't really rely on those guys to come in. So it's going to be interesting to see how they continue to build this roster.
Absolutely. So, JC, the third matchup I think that we should all be paying attention to going into this upcoming game versus the Houston Texans preseason week number 3. This one's a big one. You alluded to it just a moment ago, or earlier on in the video, I guess I should say. It is the Bucs backup offensive line versus the Texans backup front seven. This is going to be interesting because the Bucs backup O-line seemingly hasn't been able to do anything. They haven't been able to run block. They haven't been able to pass block through 2 preseason games. Myself personally, and a lot of people just in the Buccaneers fan base in general, have been very disappointed in the backup O-line, and I think understandably so. What are your thoughts about these guys going into this upcoming game?
It's been a lot of patchwork. You've had a lot of different guys, especially last week. You've had a lot of guys playing out of position. You had a lot of guys, you had 2 guys that were assigned a couple days before at tackle, thrown in the game. Errol Watford, he had like 1 practice and then was thrown in the game. So you've got, a little bit more continuity with this starting group that I listed earlier with Brad Seaton and Josh Wells. And then because Josh Wells wasn't available the week prior as well. Aaron Stinney, and then bringing Leverett back to his, the biggest thing I'm going to watch was Robert Hainsey. This is his last week was Leverett's first time snapping in the game. This is Robert Hainsey's first time snapping in the game as well. And while he's looked good in practice and even when he was injured, he's been taking the time off the side to snap to Brady, to snap to whatever quarterback was there, and has been doing some snapping as well during 7-on-7s when there's no contact. I want to see how he does at a game. Let's see what he does when, he's got another player on the team who's not going to hold back. Not saying Vita Vea or Steve McClendon or Nacho have been holding back on him, because they haven't, but it's a little different when you go up against somebody else. So that's really where I'm going to watch. I want to see what Nick Leverett does at guard. Aaron Stinney's been solid. Josh Wells is going to be solid. Brad Seaton, I think, is going to be pretty solid and, probably find his way in the practice squad if he doesn't get claimed. But I think this is the week we see a lot more cohesion and a lot more ability from this offensive line to get the job done in pass blocking, get the job done in run blocking. But again, too, it's going to be interesting to see, with the starters playing, it's at least a half. It's going to be less time for them to really showcase their skills. how involved are they going to get some of these, second, third string players involved? Some of these new tackles, guards, and stuff like that. Also, offensive weapons as well. Got CJ Procise on the roster. Is he running behind this line? Because I don't even think the first unit line can make CJ Procise look good at this point. But so I mean, it's going to really just depend on how they hold up and how they open holes. But I think they'll be fine.
Hey, you said it, injuries has plagued these backup units, especially along the offensive line, heavily in really big ways. So it will be interesting to pay attention to. 100%. You said it. During your points there, going up against your own guys in practice, and this is something I've been talking about through two preseason games now. Going up against your own guys in practice is way different in some circumstances than going up against other teams' guys in live game action football, and we've seen that. Difference there where some guys, hey, this guy had a good string of practices and then he goes into a preseason game and then what happened? So it has been an interesting thing to pay attention to. Like you said, guys are getting healthier. That might improve this unit in a big way. So we're going to have to pay attention to it. I know a lot of people are concerned about the depth here along this offensive line. Hopefully some of these guys coming back healthy will help out. I think especially getting Robert Hainsey back will be huge.
Yeah. I mean, I think they'll be fine going into the season. Though I have them keeping 9 offensive linemen. You're going to have Josh Wells, who the key here, James, right, is extensive injuries. If you're missing a few games, like, Josh Wells got to start 1 or 2, maybe 3 games, I think you're in a good position. Aaron Stinney, I feel most comfortable about if, one of these guards go down for a little while. Feel pretty comfortable he can step in and do a solid job. We saw it last year. We saw it on the biggest stage in the world last year throughout the Saints, the NFC Championship and the Super Bowl. So I don't think the spotlight's going to be too big for him. But if we've got to see the other 2 guys who I think make the team, obviously Robert Hainsey or Nick Levet for an extended period of time, I think that they can be exploited. And those are the real spots. Those 3 spots are the ones that I'm really worried about, is the extensive long-term injuries. So knock on wood, pray to the football gods that they're pretty safe on the offensive line, because if Tristan Wirfs goes down for an extended period of time, you're in trouble.
Absolutely. So, JC, the second to last matchup I think that we should all be paying attention to going into this upcoming game versus the Houston Texans, it's going to be Kyle Trask versus the Texans backup defense. Now, first off, I don't even know how much of Kyle Trask we are going to see in this upcoming game. You'd imagine it's probably a quarter, right? I think that's safe to say, maybe. But the reason I have this on there is, quite frankly, this is going to be the last time we'll get to see Kyle Trask play for an entire year. And I know there's been a lot of people who've wanted to see him in the preseason, and I think we've had mixed results. Not all entirely his fault at all, by the way, which I think is an important thing to make a note of. But what do you think about Kyle Trask coming in here against this backup Texans defense, just the entirety of it, and this being the last time we're going to be seeing him play for the entirety of the year?
Yeah, it's funny because, especially with Tampa fans, it's a melting pot for sure. There's a lot of different people from all over that move to Tampa, but you have a large portion of them who are Gator fans and a larger portion who are Florida State fans. So you have half the guys saying, oh, this guy's a bum. The other guy's saying, like, he's great, So the problem, and you mentioned it right off the get, is, he's had some struggles. Not all of them were his fault. And through it all, Bruce Arians has praised him. It's learning moments. He's a rookie. He's getting used to the game speed. And the biggest thing here is we've seen him with these, 7, 8, 9, 10 receivers, right? We haven't seen him with the first starting 5, first starting 6 really at all, to really be able to say, okay, how can he do again, with the number 1 through 3 wide receivers? How can he do with the top offensive line? So that's something we won't see here. So really to kind of grade his play when he's running with, practice squad guys and guys who won't be on the team has been a little bit unfair, I think, but I'm not worried. Some of the throws I've seen him make in practice, some of the plays and reads I've seen him make, I think he'll be fine. I'm definitely excited to see whether it's a quarter, because I think they'll get Gabbert work. I think they're going to get Griff a little bit of work. And then, hopefully, I think you're right, that fourth quarter will be all Trask. So, how he'll do, is really going to depend on what's dependent the last two games, James, is how will his receivers do? Will they drop the ball on him? He had some great throws last game that would have been, potentially touchdowns, big gains either way. But, balls going through receivers' hands doesn't help you, doesn't make you look good on the stat sheet when he probably would have had over 100 yards last week. But things happen on the football field. I don't think he'll have any trouble moving the ball as long as his receivers are catching the ball. I think that he is under the tutelage of some of the best offensive-minded coaches in the league with Bruce Arians, Clyde Christensen, Tom Moore, who we'll forget more than we'll ever know, Byron Leftwich, and then, he's got Brady too. So, he's learning a great deal, and I think that he's going to apply it on the field. Problem is, can you do that in a quarter? Can you do that with the backup guys? We know he can throw to NFL talent because he did it last year with Tony and Pitts. But I'm excited to see him for the last time this year, hopefully the last time this year, and see what he can kind of do next year after a year in the meeting rooms and a year learning.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I agree 100%. I know a lot of people are probably going to be sad about Trask, not being able to play. But look, it's a good thing, right? Because then we go back to Brady yeah. Come on now. So I'm just going to be excited to see progression and more development with him personally, and hopefully, he'll have a little bit of help now with his offensive line getting healthier again. Some of the practice squad guys, like you had mentioned about, have been whittled down a little bit. So now you're getting a little bit of some better groupings of wide receivers. So we'll just have to wait and see. But JC, the last last matchup I want to talk about here going into this upcoming game. This one's really kind of not unorthodox, but it's an interesting one here, is the bubble roster guys versus each other. Oh. And I think that one's going to be a very huge one. I mean, maybe not in the eyes of Bucs fans, but obviously for all these guys on the roster, right? There's only going to be a couple more days after this game where these guys have a chance to make this roster. The Buccaneers have to be down to 53 players by August 31st. And we say like, oh, second preseason game, it's their last big chance. But like, this is like their last, and then last chance. Like, they have nothing left after this. So it's going to be very huge. It's going to be very interesting. What are your thoughts on really a lot of these bubble roster guys here going into this last preseason game?
Yeah, I mean, you said it best. I mean, tomorrow's their last practice. Then they travel to Houston on Friday, and then they have the game Saturday. They're off for the next 4 days after that. League mandated. They're not back till Thursday. So these players who are going to be coming in the facility on Tuesday are players that are turning in their playbooks, and their dream is, over, as far as making the 53-man roster before cut-down date. It's going to be really interesting. And, I think this year Bucs fans are a little bit more invested in this competition because there's nothing else to talk about. I mean, you've got all the starters, and I mean, we can talk about Trask and Jalen Darden and Joe Tryon Shoyinka till we're blue in the face. But after you get through all that, I mean, it hasn't really been a lot going on other than, okay, this players look good, that players look good, this players look good. You've got guys who are kind of right there on the bubble. A guy like Khalil Davis, has he shown enough? And Nick Leverett versus Brad Seaton. Which one are they going to take? I mean, we talked to Bruce Arians today. Has Jalen Darden proved enough as a kick returner, punt returner, that they're going to feel comfortable with him going in the season? Bruce said if they're not comfortable, he's got no problem carrying 7 wide receivers with Jaydon Mickens on that team. Do they keep a 4th tight end? I personally don't think so. I don't think any of these guys have shown enough as a blocker and separated themselves other than a pass catcher. And if you're going to keep another pass catcher, Jaydon Mickens or a guy on the wide receiver group makes more sense. On the defensive side of the ball, besides Khalil Davis, Steve McClendon, I've been on the train that I don't necessarily think he's a lock. Bruce said he's been dealing with some personal issues. He's 35 years old. Do they try to sneak him on the practice squad and try to bring him up and call him up if they need him and keep a guy like Khalil Davis? You got to remember, too, they're playing the waiver game as well. So when you're looking at these battles and looking at these guys, it's who can you waive to, get back on the practice squad, or in the case of a guy like Cam Gill, who's an outside linebacker who hasn't practiced in nearly a month, you're going to want to sneak him onto that short-term IR most likely, or else they would have put him on long-term IR and end the season. So you're going to have to waive a player to keep him on your 53-4 data before you can put him on that short-term IR list. And then, so what guys are you going to waive that you think you can get back? Especially as a Super Bowl team, a lot of teams are going to be looking at your roster and saying, okay, how can we improve our roster with some of the guys on your team? Inside linebacker is one of the biggest battles in camp right now. KJ Britt looks like he's got the edge, but Joe Jones and Grant Stewart are also there. Joe Jones had that pick 6. Grant Stewart has been showing up on special teams. The 5th cornerback spot, or 6th. Bruce said today, I have an article today on Pewter Report about 10 linebackers or 10 DBs. Bruce said he's going to keep one or the other. Depends on special teams. Do they keep Antonio Hamilton, who's been playing mostly slot? Bruce said that he's got a lot of slot guys. He's like an outside guy. Well, that's D. Delaney. Has D. Delaney showed enough? Herb Miller, who he said hasn't really progressed as he'd like, but he's in the battle. Has he shown enough to win that spot? Chris Wilcox, 7th round pick, who's got speed and length and size, has been playing as a gunner. Is that enough for him to make the team, or does he get waived? And then comes down to safety with Chris Cooper and Javon Hagan. Chris Cooper got praised for his special teams work the other day. Javon Hagan has been playing special teams snaps as well, and he's your leading tackler through 2 preseason games, had that fumble recovery, 4 tackles for a loss, playing defense. These battles between these players are going to come down to not just special teams, but also, you're not really counting on them for contributions as much on defense. But if you are in a pinch, can this dude play special teams, and can he contribute as a defender? And then again, the waiver wire game. Can we release these 2 safeties or these 3 cornerbacks for a game? And who else is going to be available on the waiver wire? Knowing that they have the last pick, the last claim, because they won the Super Bowl last year. So any waiver claims that go in they get 32. They get last choice. They get the scraps. What are they going to do? Do they even look to trade players after this game that were on the bubble? Tanner Hudson, can you fetch a conditional 7th round pick for him? Can you fetch a 6th round pick for this guy? So it's going to be interesting to see these players. You heard it from a couple of them today. Javon Hagan said, we got to go out with a bang. This is our last chance. Watching these, we're probably not going to get to play to the 4th quarter. They're going to get a quarter, maybe a quarter and a half tops to show that they deserve to make this team. And I said, I'm going to take some mental reps. I'll be watching these starters and taking mental reps. So when I go out there, I'm prepared. So it's going to be a battle. The battle comes down to a close after this weekend. And, it's really going to be interesting to see how they build this roster. I mean, I've had my predictions out there, but they could really go any way. I think the offense is the most set in stone, though. It's the defense that there's really a lot of these battles going on between inside linebacker, cornerback, and even potentially safety to an extent.
Yeah, I agree 100%, man. These guys don't have a lot of time left. It's a somber, realization, right? It's a sad realization, but it is what it is at the end of the day, right? This happens, These guys are going to have a last practice together. This game will be the last chance for a lot of these guys to be together, Now, granted, a lot of these guys might end up on a practice squad with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We'll have to wait and see with that. But this is where you finally start to see these final few battles winding down, man. We've seen some of the guys whittle away and fall off, in terms of being in competition. Now you're down to a few guys at each, position battle here. What's going to happen? That's going to be a very important thing to pay attention to, because at the end of the day, I know a lot of people say, who cares who's the 5th cornerback, or who cares who's maybe the 4th tight end or the 7th wide receiver. I always have this mentality of you never know who is going to make an impact, and it's an important thing to remember, because injuries can happen, guys can get benched, anything can happen in the NFL, so really you never know who's going to make an impact. So yeah, it is important to see who ends up getting these roster spots at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But with that being said, JC, that is it for this video. Guys, let us know what you think about everything we talked about down in the comments section down below. JC, before we head off here and sign off, do you have any final words?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a heck of a preseason, heck of a training camp. Getting to watch these guys perform, they just look like a well-oiled machine. You've been out there. This offense and this defense, I think, are ready to go right out the get. So, guys, buckle up. It should be a great season. Hopefully, we don't have any injuries. Other than that, I want to thank you for having me on here. I want to thank, the fans of Mr. Bucs Nation, for supporting me, for supporting you. Guys, if you want, give me a follow on Twitter at JC Allen NFL. Check out my work at Peter Report. And yeah, it's been a blast on here, and definitely want to come back and do it again with you sometime.
Absolutely, man. Would love to have you back on. For everybody who is watching here at the end of the video, I will have the links to JC's Twitter page as well as the Pewter Report YouTube channel down in the pinned comment down in the comments section down below. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hope you all enjoyed. And as always, we will see you all in the next video or the next live stream. But until then, and as always, guys, goodbye for now and go Bucs.
Out.